flour, water, and whatever was left in the pantry. The Great Depression forced America to eat creatively, or not eat at all. Dandelion salad from the yard, potato water soup that stretched for days, mock apple pie made from crackers and lemon. These weren't trendy recipes from food bloggers. They were surviving. The clatter of tin plates echoes through empty cupboards, steam rises from watery broths, and families gather around tables set with more hope than food. The 1930s didn't just reshape America's economy. It rewrote every cookbook, every shopping list, every dinner prayer. We tracked down the actual recipes, USDA guidelines, and newspaper clippings that fed a generation through the hardest decade in modern history. With grocery prices climbing again, these meals aren't just history. They're blueprints. Stay. Item 1. Depression. Cake hit kitchen tables across America in 1932, born from necessity when eggs, butter, and milk became luxuries. This dark, dense cake required only flour, sugar, cocoa, baking soda, salt, water, oil, and vinegar. Families called it wacky cake because the recipe seemed impossible. No mixing bowls, just stir everything in the baking pan. The vinegar and baking soda created the rise that eggs normally provided. It cost roughly 15 cents to make an entire cake that could feed 8 people for dessert over 3 days. Today's version still works for under $2, and the dense chocolate flavor surprises modern palates expecting lighter textures. The cake survived in church cookbooks long after the Depression ended. Item 2. Dandelion salad became a spring ritual in 1934 when produce prices soared beyond most family budgets. Young dandelion greens from yards and vacant lots cost nothing and provided vitamin C after long winters of preserved foods. Families picked them before the flowers bloomed, when leaves stayed tender and less bitter. The standard preparation mixed dandelion greens with hot bacon fat, vinegar, salt, and sometimes a chopped hard-boiled egg if available. One bunch of yard dandelions could serve a family of 4 as a complete salad course. Modern foragers still prepare dandelion salad the same way, though suburban lawns treated with chemicals make wild harvesting risky. The practice taught children to identify edible plants, knowledge that saved lives. Item 3. Potato water. Soup stretched ingredients further than seemed possible, turning the starchy liquid from boiled potatoes into a filling meal base. Home economists in 1933 taught families to save the water after cooking potatoes, then heat it with salt, pepper, a pat of butter if available, and maybe some milk. The cloudy, thick liquid provided calories and nutrients that would otherwise go down the drain. Families often added leftover vegetables, scraps of meat, or even just more potatoes to make it heartier. A single pot could serve 6 people for under 20 cents total cost. The soup filled stomachs when money ran thin between paychecks. Modern food waste reduction advocates rediscovered potato water as a natural thickener for other soups and gravies. Item 4. Mock apple pie fooled taste buds when real apples cost too much or spoiled before families could buy them. The recipe used Ritz crackers, lemon juice, sugar, and spices to create a filling that mimicked apple texture and tartness. Nabisco actually promoted this recipe during the Depression, recognizing that crackers were more shelf-stable and affordable than fresh fruit. The lemon juice and cinnamon provided the expected apple pie flavor profile, while crackers gave the necessary texture. One sleeve of Ritz crackers cost about 10 cents and made a full pie that served 8. The recipe remained popular into the 1940s and appeared in Nabisco advertising for decades. Home bakers today use it for novelty, but Depression families relied on it for affordable dessert that felt normal. Item 5. Milk toast transformed stale bread into comfort food that stretched milk supplies and filled hungry children. The dish layered toasted bread pieces in a bowl, then covered them with warm milk seasoned with salt, pepper, and a small amount of butter. Families served it for breakfast, lunch, or light dinner, when money was especially tight. The bread absorbed the milk and softened into a porridge-like consistency that was easy to eat and digest. One slice of day-old bread and half a cup of milk could make a serving that cost roughly 5 cents. Children often received milk toast when recovering from illness because it was gentle and nutritious. The dish remained a nursery staple through the 1950s before disappearing from most American tables. Item 6. Hoover stew got its bitter name from President Herbert Hoover, blamed for the economic collapse. This one-pot meal combined whatever vegetables families could afford or grow, usually potatoes, onions, carrots, and cabbage, with small amounts of meat when available. The stew cooked slowly to develop flavor from minimal ingredients, often simmering for hours with just salt, pepper, and maybe some herbs from window gardens. Families made huge batches because it improved with reheating and could feed everyone for days. The cost per serving dropped to around 8 cents when made with vegetables and no meat. Street vendors sometimes sold bowls of similar stews for 10 cents in breadlines. Modern slow cooker versions use the same technique of long, slow cooking to maximize flavor from simple ingredients. Item 7. Prune whip offered dessert when sugar was precious and fresh fruit was unaffordable. This airy pudding combined stewed prunes with egg whites and just a tablespoon of sugar, beaten until light and fluffy. Prunes were relatively inexpensive because they kept well without refrigeration and provided natural sweetness plus nutrients. The egg whites created volume that made a small amount of fruit serve more people. Families often served prune whip with a small dollop of cream if they could afford it, or plain as a light dessert. The preparation took time and arm strength for hand whipping, but cost only about 12 cents for a dessert, serving 6 people. The dish fell out of favor as prosperity returned, and more elaborate desserts became possible. Item 8. Mulligan stew became the signature dish of hobo camps and unemployment lines, made from whatever ingredients anyone could contribute to the communal pot. The stew had no fixed recipe. It might contain vegetables, meat scraps, bones for broth, potatoes, onions, or canned tomatoes, depending on what was available. Everyone contributed something, even if just wild greens or day-old bread. The pot simmered constantly, with new ingredients added throughout the day. This cooperative cooking method fed more people than individual meals could, and created community among strangers sharing hard times. The name came from Irish slang for stew, but the concept spread across all ethnic groups during the Depression. Modern versions appear at outdoor gatherings and camping trips, maintaining the spirit of communal cooking. Item 9. Water pie provided dessert when pantries held almost nothing sweet. This custard-style pie used mainly water, flour, sugar, and vanilla to create a surprisingly satisfying filling that baked into a creamy consistency. The small amount of butter or margarine added richness, while the flour thickened the water into something resembling custard. Families made the crust from basic flour, lard, and water, no fancy ingredients needed. The entire pie cost less than 25 cents to make and served 8 people dessert. The vanilla extract, though expensive by the drop, provided enough flavor to mask the simplicity of the other ingredients. Children especially loved water pie because it tasted like vanilla pudding in pie form. Item 10. Cornmeal mush appeared on breakfast tables when oatmeal became too expensive and families needed filling hot cereal. This porridge combined cornmeal with water or milk, cooked slowly until thick and creamy. Southern families often served it with sorghum syrup or molasses, while northern families might add a small amount of butter and salt. The dish provided substantial calories for manual laborers starting long days. Leftover mush could be sliced and fried for dinner, creating a completely different texture and flavor. A pound of cornmeal cost about 8 cents and made breakfast for a family of 6 for several days. The dish remained popular in rural areas long after the Depression ended. Item 11. Cabbage roll soup delivered the flavors of stuffed cabbage when meat for traditional rolls was unaffordable. This soup used chopped cabbage, diced tomatoes, onions, and just a small amount of ground meat stretched with rice or barley. The ingredients simmered together until the cabbage softened and the flavors melded into a hearty, filling soup. Families could make a large pot for under 40 cents that would provide dinner for 6 people plus leftovers. The soup improved with reheating and could be thinned with more water or broth if unexpected guests arrived. Eastern European families adapted their traditional recipes to fit Depression-era budgets while maintaining familiar flavors. Modern versions often add more vegetables and less meat, following the same principle of stretching ingredients. Item 12. Vinegar pie shocked taste buds, but satisfied sweet cravings when sugar and fruit were luxuries beyond reach. This custard pie combined vinegar with eggs, butter, sugar, and flour to create a tangy sweet filling that somehow worked despite its unusual main ingredient. The vinegar provided the tartness that lemon or other citrus fruits would normally contribute to dessert. Families used whatever vinegar they had on hand, though cider vinegar produced the best flavor. The pie cost roughly 20 cents to make and served 8 people a proper dessert slice. The recipe originated in Appalachian communities where vinegar was homemade and always available. Today's food enthusiasts rediscover vinegar pie as an example of creative Depression-era baking. Item 13. Stone soup wasn't just a fairy tale. It became a real strategy for community meals during the hardest times. One family would start with a pot of water and a clean stone, then invite neighbors to contribute whatever they could spare. Someone might add potatoes and other onions. A third family might contribute a bone for broth or some leftover vegetables. The stone served as a psychological catalyst that made asking for help feel like a community cooking project rather than charity. The resulting soup fed everyone who contributed and often produced leftovers for families in the greatest need. This cooperative approach to eating appeared in neighborhoods across America as people learned to share resources. Modern community gardens and soup kitchens use similar collaborative cooking methods. Item 14. Egg drop soup. Chinese-American style became popular in urban areas where families learned to stretch one egg into soup for 4 people. The technique involved beating an egg with a fork while slowly drizzling it into simmering broth, creating ribbon-like strands that made the soup look more substantial. Families made the broth from bouillon cubes, vegetable scraps, or saved chicken bones. The protein from one egg, distributed throughout the soup, provided nutrition for the whole family at minimal cost. Chinese-American restaurants often served larger portions for 15 cents, making it an affordable restaurant meal during hard times. The soup technique taught home cooks how to make small amounts of protein feed more people. Item 15. Newspaper cake earned its name because families literally used newspaper as a substitute for expensive parchment paper when baking. This spice cake relied on basic pantry staples: flour, sugar, baking soda, salt, and warm spices like cinnamon and cloves. The newspaper, when thoroughly cleaned and greased, prevented sticking just like proper baking paper would. Families often baked this cake for special occasions when they wanted to celebrate despite financial hardship. The warm spices made simple ingredients taste festive and special. One cake cost about 18 cents to make and could serve a large family or provide treats for several days. The practice of using newspaper continued in some rural areas through the 1940s until parchment paper became widely available and affordable. 1938 Rural Homemaker magazine, Patterns and Takeaways. 4 clear patterns emerged from Depression-era cooking that transformed American food culture permanently. First, ingredient substitution became an art form. Vinegar replaced lemon juice, crackers mimicked apples, and water stood in for milk when necessary. Families learned that texture and seasoning could fool the palate into accepting alternatives that cost much less than traditional ingredients. Second, one-pot meals dominated because they stretched ingredients further and used less fuel for cooking. Soups, stews, and casseroles allowed families to combine small amounts of many ingredients into filling meals that improved with reheating. This cooking style also meant fewer dishes to wash, saving soap and hot water. Third, community cooking and sharing became survival strategies that built social bonds during isolated times. From mulligan stews in hobo camps to stone soup in neighborhoods, cooperative meals allowed everyone to eat better than they could individually. These practices created networks of mutual support that extended beyond just sharing food. Fourth, preservation and waste elimination reached new levels of creativity. Families saved potato water, reused day-old bread, foraged edible weeds, and found uses for every scrap. Nothing edible was discarded. And cooks learned to transform leftovers into completely different dishes. Modern parallels include the current trend toward batch cooking and meal prep, which follows the same principles of efficiency and cost control that Depression families mastered. Today's zero-waste cooking movement echoes the necessity-driven conservation that characterized 1930s kitchens. Spotlight. Depression cake deserves its own spotlight because it represents the ingenuity that defined an entire era of American cooking. The cake emerged in 1932 when economic collapse made traditional baking ingredients unaffordable for most families. Standard cake recipes required eggs, butter, and milk, all of which became luxury items for families choosing between food and rent. The breakthrough came from home economists who understood the science behind baking chemistry. They realized that vinegar and baking soda could create the same chemical reaction that eggs provided, while oil could replace butter's fat content and water could substitute for milk's liquid base. The result was a cake that actually worked, with a rich chocolate flavor and dense, moist texture. By 1934, the recipe had spread through community networks, appearing in church cookbooks, women's club publications, and neighborhood recipe swaps. Bakeries even began selling Depression cake as an affordable alternative to fancier desserts. The cake's success proved that creativity could overcome scarcity, giving families a way to provide normal experiences, like birthday celebrations and Sunday desserts, despite extraordinary circumstances. The recipe's decline began in the late 1940s as prosperity returned and families could afford traditional ingredients again. However, Depression cake never completely disappeared. It survived in family recipe collections and experienced revivals during later economic downturns, proving that practical solutions often outlast the crises that created them. 3 Depression-era techniques still work for modern budget cooking. First, save all vegetable cooking water to use a soup base or bread liquid. Potato water, pasta water, and vegetable steaming liquid contain nutrients and starch that add flavor and body to other dishes. This practice can reduce grocery bills by eliminating the need to buy separate broth or stock. Second, learn to substitute expensive ingredients with cheaper alternatives that provide similar function. Use vinegar plus baking soda instead of eggs in baking, extend ground meat with rice or oats in meatballs and meatloaf, and replace fresh herbs with dried versions that cost much less per use. Third, master the art of one-pot meals that stretch ingredients and minimize cleanup. Soups, stews, and casseroles allow small amounts of protein and vegetables to feed more people while creating satisfying, complete meals. These techniques also work well for batch cooking and meal prep, saving both time and money in modern kitchens. 25 meals that fed America through its darkest decade prove that creativity beats scarcity every time. These recipes weren't just about survival, they were about dignity, community, and keeping families together around the dinner table when everything else was falling apart. Next up, 25 lunchbox snacks from the 1970s you totally forgot because after learning to survive, America learned to indulge. Hit that subscribe button and let us know which Depression meal your family still makes today.